Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today I've got a hotly anticipated monitor review for you. I don't think I've been able to publish a display review in the last few months without seeing a deluge of comments asking me to review the AOC 24G2. But here I am, I've finally been able to get one in-house for testing, so yeah, we'll have some comprehensive benchmark results in a moment or two. I think it's fair to say this monitor has been hugely popular, not just from the comments everyone keeps leaving, but also in terms of its availability. One of the main reasons I haven't been able to test it until now is simply that stock has been hard to come by, and with a certain virus plaguing the globe right now, it's limited the ability for AOC to ship and restock this display in countries like Australia. As soon as the 24G2 hits shelves, it quickly sells out, so this issue might continue for a little while. So why is the 24G2 so popular? Well, it looks to deliver in two key areas. One is, of course, the specifications. 24-inch 1080p 144Hz IPS panel with adaptive sync. IPS is a highly sought after technology for gamers given its balance of speed and color quality, plus we're at the perfect panel size for 1080p, and we are getting a high refresh rate on top of that. And despite 1080p monitors being around for ages, high refresh IPS variants are still a relatively new category, which is also adding to the interest. The second area is the price tag. The 24G2 is available for just $180 US, which is a very low price for this sort of premium 1080p 144Hz monitor. It wasn't too long ago that only high refresh TNs were available below $200. Now we have IPS and VA available in this space. At $180, this isn't the outright cheapest 1080p 144Hz display. We can find curved VA panels and the occasional fast TN for less, but for an IPS display, this is a great deal. The AOC monitor's popularity is compounded by lack of competition. Right now, the only other 24-inch 1080p 144Hz IPS monitor on the market is Acer's VG240YP, which is normally about $20 more expensive. I suspect it won't be too long until we have more options available though. And as a quick note, both the AOC 24G2 and 24G2U are basically the same monitor. Depending on the retailer, you might see it named one way or the other, so this review will apply to both of these models. Let's kick this one off with a look at the design, and I'm really impressed with what AOC has delivered here. IPS monitors tend to be a premium option, but given we're still talking about a sub $200 monitor, I wouldn't have been surprised to see some corners cut, similar to what ViewSonic did with their dirt cheap 1440p IPS monitor, the VX2758 2KP MHD. But we're not really seeing that with the 24G2. I wouldn't call this a flagship or high-end design, but it's definitely quality. The area AOC has really delivered in is the stand. It's height adjustable, it swivels and pivots, so you can use this as a portrait monitor if you want to. The classic move for cheaper monitors is to just have a tilt adjustable stand, but AOC has gone all out here with something quite ergonomic, with VESA mounting support if you need to take it further. Build materials are acceptable, it's standard plastic all around here. The stand does have this silver section which appears a bit metallic, but the outer surface is still plastic. A few red highlights here and there on the stand, front of the monitor, and then these V sections on the back. I was pretty impressed with the bezel sizes here too, very slim, which I love to see. For inputs, we get two HDMI ports and a display port, plus a VGA input for those people stuck on 10-year-old graphics cards. One area AOC has cut costs in is everything else. No built-in speakers, although there is an audio output, and no USB hub. We're also only getting face buttons to control the OSD, which are harder to use than the directional toggle I normally recommend. The feature set here is AOC's usual affair, which is solid, and there have been no obvious cutbacks here. Low blue light mode, frame counters, few color modes, and so on. There's also a backlight strobing mode, which I'll talk about a little later. So for panel performance, I was pretty interested to see how the 24G2 performs, because this display uses an IGZO IPS panel from Panda rather than from the usual big three in AU Optronics, LG or Samsung. Smaller manufacturers don't always produce the best performing panels, especially when we're talking about a cheapish monitor, so response times are going to be very interesting here. Before that though, it's important to talk about adaptive sync performance. This is a 144Hz panel with a 48Hz minimum, so we get low frame rate compensation, allowing smooth variable refresh at all frame rates up to 144 FPS. It also works fine with either AMD cards through FreeSync or NVIDIA cards through G-Sync, provided you enable support in the NVIDIA control panel. I didn't spot any flickering or other adaptive sync issues during my testing. AOC offers 4 overdrive modes with the 24G2, and the default is surprisingly surprisingly off. This gives us a good look at native IPS panel performance, and while the numbers here aren't amazing, an 8 millisecond average response for an IPS panel without overdrive is better than a lot of the dirt cheap budget displays you see out there. This IPS from Panda definitely does not fall into that sort of category. Weak overdrive improves the situation to a 7.5 millisecond average, but I don't think many people will use this mode. Then we get to medium overdrive, which provides good performance, a 6.66 millisecond grade average with no appreciable overshoot issues. We get decent response time compliance here too, not perfect, but 80% of transitions getting within a reasonable margin at 144Hz is solid. But we can do one better here. Using the strong mode at 144Hz, I recorded a 4.89 millisecond grade average, which is very good from an IPS type display. There's very little overshoot here as well, with response time compliance right up there at over 90%. While medium is also decent, there is no doubting the 24G2 can provide a great 144Hz experience with solid motion handling using the strong overdrive mode. Strong is also good for most mid to high refresh rates. At 120Hz, performance is essentially the same as 144Hz, while at 100Hz, we do start to see the introduction of some minor overshoot artifacts. However, given only 2% of transitions saw noticeable inverse ghosting, and overall response times were below 5 milliseconds on average, using the strong overdrive mode is still my recommendation for gaming at or around 100Hz. However, when we fall right down to 60Hz, strong does deliver significant overshoot, so I wouldn't recommend this mode for 60Hz gaming. 35% of transitions had at least an overshoot of 15%, which presents itself as a light trail following moving objects. The grade average is still good here, but this level of overshoot isn't ideal. Switch it down to medium though, and we get strong performance with only a somewhat slower grade average of 6.18 milliseconds. Like a lot of monitors, this does mean the AOC 24G2 has two optimal overdrive modes, strong for mid to high refresh rates and medium for lower refresh rates around 60Hz. Switching between the two will be relatively straightforward for fixed refresh gamers. Say you have a console at 60Hz, then choosing medium for that input makes sense. It's a little less clear for gamers that are making use of the entire adaptive sync range. If you know you'll mostly be up near 100 to 144Hz, I'd stick this on strong, but if you think you'll be using lower refresh rates more often, then medium overdrive might be the way to go. The best monitors have one overdrive mode that is usable in all circumstances, so this isn't the best we can get, but I still think the 24G2 performs very well in response times. And we'll see that when we look at some of ththese comparison charts. The AOC 24G2 performs very well at 144Hz with its tuned overdrive, outperforming most other 1080p monitors I've tested. Most notably, we see performance better than VA panels, such as the C27G1 and Pixio PXC243, which are varying degrees of slower. The 24G2 also crushes the Viotech GFE24C, a flat 1080p 144Hz VA panel that's a bit cheaper. There are some notable exceptions here. The Viotech GN24C is one of my favourite 1080p monitors to recommend because it has aggressive overdrive that's quite effective at 144Hz, more so than you usually see from a VA panel. The 24G2 performs about on par here. Meanwhile, LG's budget 1080p high refresh TN panel, the 24GL600F, is marginally faster, but in my opinion, not fast enough to offset the usual issues with TN like poor viewing angles and low contrast. Good dark level performance is one reason many buyers prefer IPS over VA, and that shows again here looking at the 24G2 results. Most VA panels again are much slower in this metric, the exception being the GN24C, which as I mentioned is fast for a 1080p VA monitor. No issues with response time compliance here. The 24G2 achieving over 90% is perfectly acceptable and means we're getting a true 144Hz experience. Some budget 1080p monitors, again like the Pixio PXC243, aren't as solid in this regard. Error rates were one of the most impressive aspects about this panel at 144Hz. Despite offering sub 5 millisecond response times, the 24G2 is able to offer next to no overshoot at its maximum refresh rate with the strong overdrive mode. This is much better than many other offerings, outperforming the GN24C. While I like the GN24C, I think the 24G2 is a better performing monitor, and this is one area where it shines. Inverse ghosting, as expected from the error rates, is a non-issue, and at 60Hz, when turning the display down to medium overdrive, we do see it sit mid-table, which is okay from a 1080p IPS display. The GN24C is a small amount faster here, but does so with significant levels of overshoot, another reason why I prefer the IPS carrying 24G2 here for gamers. Input lag is good with around 1 millisecond of processing delay and an overall input lag below 10 milliseconds, which is great for gaming. Typically, you won't get faster results than this unless you decide to get a 240Hz monitor, but that's probably not necessary unless you're super hardcore about competitive gaming. Another really impressive aspect to the 24G2's performance is power consumption, which in these reviews is generally not something I spend much time on. At 200 nits, the 24G2 consumes 27% less power than the next best 1080p 144Hz 24-inch monitor I've tested, which is a significant difference and is a surprise benefit of Panda's panel. I suspect using IGZO technology here has provided a boost to efficiency. The backlight strobing mode AOC provides here can improve motion clarity a bit further than the strong overdrive mode, but it's not perfect. Using the maximum MBR mode of 20, we get the best clarity but moderate strobe crosstalk as seen here in Blurbuster's UFO test with pursuit camera photography that simulates how the human eye tracks motion. Reducing the MBR mode can hide the duplicate images caused by crosstalk, but this makes the backlight pulse length longer and thus exposes more blur as the MBR mode is reduced. A setting around 10 to 15 is good here, but it's not great. Next up, let's explore color quality. Unlike most other 1080p 144Hz monitors on the market, including the GN24C, PXC243, and 24GL600F we've been talking about, the AOC 24G2 does support a wide color gamut. I achieved around 89% coverage of the DCI P3 color space, which isn't as high as some premium IPS displays, but does offer some wide gamut abilities and gives the 24G2 another selling point given most of its competition is stuck with sRGB only. However, sRGB performance is still important, so let's look at that first. Out of the box, Grayscale performance is very strong, with my unit only having a slight reddish-orange tint. The sRGB gamma curve is well adhered to, and overall Delta E performance is strong, with a 1.35 average, below the 2.0 we like to see for accuracy. To me, this suggests AOC have done at least some work at the factory to make this monitor look nice when you first turn it on. Saturation performance is limited by the usual issue with wide gamut monitors, and that's not shipping with an sRGB gamut clamp for viewing most content, which in 2020 is still sRGB. So we do get some slight oversaturation here. It's not too bad, which is reflected in a Delta E average of 2.3, and in fact some people may like this extra vibrant look, but it's not perfectly accurate. Not that I'd expect that from a sub $200 gaming display. Similar situation in ColorChecker, a Delta E average of 2.28 is fine. Perhaps it would have been better had this been an sRGB only monitor, but then you'd lose wide gamut capabilities, and I feel a lot of people will be interested in its P3 coverage, especially as an IPS monitor. I was able to improve performance marginally with a few OSD tweaks, but that's mainly from adjusting the white point very slightly to be perfect. It's not really worth getting into the performance details there, so let's instead look at how the panel performs after a full calibration. No issues here showing sRGB content now, because the panel is capable of 100% sRGB coverage. A proper calibration does make the 24G2 shine and perform accurately. As always, the ICC profile is available for our Patreons. Meanwhile, for P3 performance after calibration, as the panel can only do around 90% P3 coverage, there are some issues at the top end of saturation, with a few high delta E's, particularly for reds as these colors are clipped. And you see that as well in our ColorChecker test, but because most colors are accurate, the experience is still good here, just not quite good enough for color accurate professional work. And just briefly, if you are interested, P3 performance out of the box did deliver sub 2.0 delta E averages in saturation and ColorChecker tests, so wide gamut performance from the get-go is pretty decent. The 24G2 produces strong brightness at 378 nits when calibrated, which is more than enough for most viewing environments and also helps out with the backlight strobing mode. Minimum brightness is high at around 100 nits though, in case you use your monitor at very low brightness levels. One area I was really surprised in is the contrast ratio. At nearly 1500 to 1, this IPS panel produces the best contrast figures I've tested for an IPS, assisted by IGZO technology. However, contrast is still only half that achieved with most 1080p VA monitors, which hit 3000 to 1 or above. The 24G2 is really great for an IPS, but if deep blacks are your thing, heading down the VA path might be a bit better for you. On the other hand, I wasn't as impressed with the viewing angles, which are typically excellent from an IPS. They're not bad, but there is a noticeable brightness drop at some off angles. It does depend on the exact angle you view at, but overall viewing angles are more in line with typical VA monitors than the best IPS has to offer. Still, given the panel is flat, unlike most VAs in this price bracket, which are curved in this sort of market, I'm not too upset with the viewing angles here. They're still pretty good. Uniformity is also good, a few minor issues in the top right corner of my unit, but nothing significant, and this does vary from panel to panel. I didn't experience any out of the ordinary IPS glow with the 24G2 here either, so that's a positive. Phew, that's another monitor review done and dusted, and luckily this is a monitor that's really worth reviewing because it's something I'll be recommending for a while. In short, the AOC 24G2 is excellent, and I don't use that word often in these reviews, but I think it's warranted here. The 24G2 is not only affordable, but it performs really well in nearly every category, so with this monitor we're getting a rare mix of low price point and top-end performance for its class. Response time performance is impressive, especially at mid to high refresh rates, outperforming most other sub $200 1080p monitors on the market. In areas where it matches competitors, it often beats them in others, leading to all-round strong motion handling. We also get low input lag, a backlight strobing mode, and perfect adaptive sync performance, making the 24G2 a great monitor for gamers. As I would hope from an IPS, the 24G2 also delivers above average color performance. This includes decent factory grayscale performance, superb contrast for an IPS, good uniformity, a flat panel with acceptable viewing angles, and solid wide gamut coverage, which is rare among monitors of this type. This combination of strong colors and strong motion performance is going to make the 24G2 highly sought after for gamers that also want a beautiful viewing experience. AOC then tops it off with an ergonomic adjustable stand with decent build quality. Most of the flaws with this product are minor, whether that's a not quite perfect backlight strobing mode or not as good viewing angles or an imperfect overdrive experience at lower refresh rates. I think most of these issues are easy to overlook when the rest of the package is very good. Certainly there are no major issues. And then there's the price. $180 is an absolute steal for this sort of performance, given in my opinion you won't find a better experience unless you move up a tier into 1440p monitors. The $150 to $200 monitor market is crowded, but even just a brief look on Amazon shows that some monitors like Acer's XFA 240 with a TN panel are barely cheaper than this high quality IPS. Even something like the LG 24GL600F, which I think is a great TN monitor, is the same price, and there's just no way I'd recommend it over the 24G2. The big toss-up here will be between the IPS 24G2 and VA alternatives like the Viotech GN24C, the Pixio PXC243, and AOC's own C24G1, which are priced between $145 and $160 right now. This does make the 24G2 around 20% more expensive, but I think it's at least 20% better, so if you can afford spending the extra $30, I think it's well worth it. There's not much more to say here. This monitor is both the best 1080p 144Hz display on the market and the best bang for buck. Anyone that's already bought one and is just checking out this review to see if they've already bought a good product should be very happy. And anyone buying one afterwards should be excited to receive a stellar product. Well done AOC, this is the second monitor I've tested from you in the last 6 months that's really exceeded my expectations. That's it for this one. As always, you can subscribe for more monitor reviews and testing, and thank you to all our Patreon members who do make reviewing these monitors possible. I had to buy one of the 24G2s for this review. AOC did actually send out one to me as well, but it didn't arrive quite in time for this review, so yeah, we had to spend some Patreon money on that. So if you're ever wondering where our Patreon funds go to, it is on reviews like this. You can also grab some of our merch, like this t-shirt. We've got mugs and hoodies as well. Links to that are in the description below, and I'll catch you in the next one.